performance management efforts for this report, for the IBM report, I basically interviewed from 4 agencies, people from the performance, the lead office responsible for performance, from program offices and from field offices, as well as congressional appropriations staff for those 4 agencies. And I just asked them what they liked about GPRA, what they liked about the the program assessment rating tool, what they didn't like, what they would like to see changed. And I heard a lot. And so let me share my findings with you. First, despite a lot of people's contention that Congress actually doesn't like all this performance measurement, what I learned was Congress likes the concept. They think it's a very sound principle for agencies to set goals and to measure their progress and to report it to Congress. But Congress was incredibly frustrated by the performance information they received from the agencies in the strategic plans, in the performance reports, in the part assessments. They just couldn't understand it. It just didn't make sense. Part of the problem was probably that the performance reports came in these voluminous documents, some of which Congress, 2 congressional folks said to me, one said, I liked this agency's report because they color-coded the performance section and I made it easy to rip it out and throw away. And a second said, I like this agency's report because the performance data was at the back of the document and I could throw it out. So part of it was the volume, but part of it was the content of the reports. It just didn't make sense. The content is an easy problem to deal with because you can just separate the performance reports from the management and the financial reports and not put them in the same large document. The content of the report was a harder issue to figure out what the problems really were. And it turns out, I think, after looking at agency reports and all the conversations I had with folks, a big part of the problem was that what agencies reported in their performance report was the percentage of targets attained, but not what the targets were, nor what the trends were. So it was very hard to find performance trend data. In many cases, you could find it if you clicked through a number of times or flipped through a lot of pages, but in other cases, you couldn't even find what the performance trends are. We just need to make it easier to find the targets and trends. The other thing that was easy to find was the part ratings. You could find if they were effective or moderately effective, but that didn't mean very much to the general public. And so what we need to do in the future is not focus so much on the target attainment rates and the part ratings, but much more on the targets and trends. A second problem was that the program assessment rating tool, the PART, used OMB examiners to do the reviews of these programs, and they were inevitably subjective. And the reality is, any kind of review like that is going to be subjective. Think about the Olympics. With the Olympics, think about the diving and the gymnastics competitions. You have, 10 judges, something like that, different countries. Everybody knows that some countries will be biased toward athletes from other countries, their own countries, and for the countries with which they're most friendly. There are different styles, different preferences, and so they have a lot of judges to minimize the subjectivity. Even with that mechanism, they realize how subjective it's still likely to be, so they throw out the outlier judges, the highest scores and the lowest scores, and just average the ones in the middle. Even there, you get people complaining about bias. Subjective reviews are inevitable. They're going to happen. And so one of the things that needs to be dealt with is a way to minimize the subjectivity of the part-type reviews to help agencies understand what works and what doesn't work. And I should say, going backward, that one of my other findings was that both the Government Performance Results Act and the Program Assessment Rating Tool had positive effects. They had positive effects. The GPRA law, basically where agency leaders used the GPRA and took strategic planning seriously, it had a tremendous positive effects across the organization. You can still see it in some agencies where it was started early, started in a very effective and positive way. You can still see its effect on the programs that are still doing very strategic thinking about what they should be focusing on and what they should not be focusing on. The program assessment rating tool, the PART, similarly had very positive effects in some agencies and some programs. It got the programs to start to pay attention to setting goals and measuring performance. They had not been doing that in a lot of programs beforehand, and so the PART was an important driver on that. But with GPRA, it took place when in a lot of agencies GPRA was only done as a paperwork exercise. And in those cases, the PART really did make the use of goals and measures more real at the implementation level, at the program level. At the same time, despite their strengths, GPRA and PART, and especially the PART, had some weaknesses. One of these is that it focused everybody on target attainment and trends. Another problem with the PART was that when agencies had tried to break down their stovepipes through the GPRA strategic plans and program plans and agency plans and agency reports, the PART rebalkanized those organizations. So some of this needs to be fixed. So with GPRA and PART, the PART review needs some adjustments. And as I said, one of the first recommendations I would make is that far less attention get paid, as I said, that my findings show that with the past performance management practices, there was too much attention to target attainment rates and to PART ratings, and too little attention to actually communicating the targets and communicating the trends. Also, it was a subjective review that became the basis of the PART, and that needs to be fixed as well. Another problem was that way too little attention was paid to the audience. Who is getting this information? What do they want to use it for? So more attention needs to be paid strategically to think about who needs performance information. Who needs to know the targets? At what level do they need to know the targets? Who needs the performance information? What form do they need that performance information? Where do they need it? And when do they need it? And finally, more attention needs to be paid to getting the accountability expectations right. That the accountability expectations in the current system are a little bit askew. There's too much attention paid to control and making sure that agencies did what they were expected to do. The performance management scorecard, red, yellow, green, everybody wanted to get to green, but they figured out how to get to green by doing certain actions, but without a real attention to was performance improving. And similarly, they could figure out how to upgrade their PART rating without sufficient attention to whether or not the actual underlying performance that the agencies were trying to influence and the programs were trying to influence, whether or not that was improving. So